shit.
Nice. Perfect. I always just perfectly time when the show starts. It's amazing. Anyway, welcome to Making the Rounds, brought to you by Emmy Award winning producer Kelsey Moser and Emmy Award on air talent Emily Rand. 2 times Emmy Award winning. Anyway.
No, actually, I didn't get it for last year.
Oh, nice. I got it
Or
for
what? Yeah, you
2020.
got it for 2022.
I got it for 2022, and you got it this year. So we are an Emmy award-winning talent and production team. Nothing can stop us. Okay, literally, it's the best show on the internet. Anyway, let's continue on to our magical journey. But yeah, what I have learned is you can put Emmy award-winning on your resume, and people still don't look at it. It's very, very interesting.
Doesn't bode well for my future.
With that out of the way, let's continue to talk about League of Legends.
Oh my god.
Since we didn't do a show, since we did that very confusing bracket prediction sheet, right?
We literally just went through every matchup. Like, yeah, everyone, like, I had breakfast with Medic the next day, and he was like, "What the fuck are you guys on about? Like, this is the least, like, intuitive thing to look at." And I'm like, yeah, we just went through every matchup.
We just went through, like, for me, it's always way more interesting to talk about how, like, either team could win rather than to talk about, oh, I predict 3-0. Oh my god, no, she didn't. That's crazy. Like, for example, yes, we did say that G2 could win against TES. However, the way we described in which G2 would win against TES was the opposite of what actually fucking happened. So,
which is actually super interesting, right? Yeah. Or at least it's super interesting to me. Hopefully it's super interesting to other people as well.
But of course, like, you can't screen cap that very easily and call it like, oh my god, they were absolutely right. The only time I had a prediction like that was like super 5 head in recent memory was like Worlds, when I did the Fnatic TS one, where I was like, yeah, I'm still going to predict TS to win, but I think it'll be 5 games, and I think this is how they'll lose. Like, things like that I can be proud of, right? And then it actually happens. But shit like this, I don't know. We were just all over the place. I think we were correct in how BLG and Gen G would work. Of course, you had Gen G winning, and I had BLG winning, so there you go. Speaking of, anything surprising? What was the most surprising and interesting thing from the last week of MSI for you? Are you muted?
Definitely the way. No, it should be good. I was like, my mic is lit up. It says I'm talking. I think the big thing for me, we just kind of brought it up, but the way that G2's bot lane stepped up against TES, and we saw them really punishing TES for certain things that we saw from the team in playoffs, specifically like going really, really ham on bot 2v2 sometimes, and just kind of underestimating their opponents. So the fact that G2 were not only able to capitalize on those mistakes, but then also draft bot lanes that I thought absorbed the pressure of TS bot lane really well. And then obviously Hans and Mickey just stepping up as individuals. That was not at all how we predicted that matchup to go, but it was really cool to watch, right? Because, like, I don't know, for me anyway, as an analyst, the best part about when you're wrong is if it's something like this, where it's just really interesting to talk about analytically how one team lost and the other team won. I still maintain that I'm kind of sad. I am sad, not kind of. I am sad that 369 had such a bad tournament, because even though I didn't think he was playing up to what we've seen from him in the past, this past split, I did not think he would perform that poorly, especially given how he has a lot of international experience. So that just made me sad because I like 369. But yeah, I think the most interesting thing for me in the final week, because obviously it's just a bunch of best of fives like slammed together, and like for people that don't know, we only had, I think, theoretically 3 days off, but one of those days off I was flying because my initial flight got delayed coming in. So we only had like kind of 2 days off in terms of actual full no matches going on. So the games are really, really crammed close together, which means that that final like best of 5 push is super interesting to watch how teams adapt. So I thought the answers that BLG were trying to find for Knight in the mid lane to specifically, I think, to prepare for Chovy, right? Because you knew they were just going to permaban Ari Talia in the finals. I think were interesting. Like, I thought the Annie coming out was really interesting against T1. I also thought T1's kind of delayed. You might have covered it in a video. I think Cadril covered it on his stream. But the way that T1 adapted the lane swap against G2, I thought was super interesting in their matchup. I was on the vertical feed for that, so I actually didn't get to talk about it that much analytically, which is kind of sad. But I liked what they did in that series. That was really interesting. And then from Gen G specifically, I also think that the way that they won was a little different, specifically similarly to some of the things I said about G2. I thought their bot lane stepped up massively. I did think that was going to be a really big issue for them, and or that would be the window through which BLG would be able to potentially find a footing. Like when we looked at the way these teams match up, I said that the way that Gen G play around mid lane and use that pressure and spread it throughout the mid game is how they're going to win. And Chovy will get the better of Knight. But I did still give, even though they were underperforming compared to expectations, I still did give Elk and On the edge over Pays and Lehens. And I thought the way that, given the way that lane swaps evolved, especially with essentially coming back into the 2v2 at level 3, I thought that was really good for Gen G. It also allowed them to pick things like the Blitzcrank, for example, which I thought was a really smart pick. And then Lehens just had like a monstrous game. So that was really fun to watch, just as someone who's been a Lehens enjoyer for a really long time, since I knew him as just this kid who was playing weird stuff and making it into challengers in Korea on the solo queue ladder. But their bot lane stepped up a lot when I expected them to perform not necessarily poorly, but kind of be like what they were in LCK, which was just kind of stable enough, I guess, while Gen G primarily played through their mid pressure, right? So that was also really cool to see from Gen G specifically.
Yeah, so I think for me, the most interesting thing was, so I did do, like, first of all, the question, yes, I did do a video on the T1 versus G2 swaps, or no, I think I did them on the T1 TL swaps. I called them vein swapping. The video is called vein swapping, if anyone wants to know, and the main TLDR of that one is how they adapted to play lane swaps with range top laners instead of the tank tops, which I think were basically along those lines. Basically, you have to hit as 3 on bot if you're playing with like range top. Generally speaking, that's the more reliable way to do it, even though I think that is like objectively kind of the bad way to do it. In general, in terms of lane swap execution, if you're playing for your ADC. So that was very interesting. I also thought it was interesting how Faker used TP for top. But for me, the most interesting thing that happened, at least in the final, was the way that BLG adapted from getting like kind of completely slammed in mid, which I did say that mid would be pretty important in the series, to basically setting up plays specifically focused on getting Knight first bases and getting Knight so that they can make plays off of that. And I think that made the series a lot more competitive. Unfortunately, you still had the closeout where we're still trying to end over and over, and Knight's answer was like, it happened, shut up. It is what it is. But it was almost a 5-game series, which would have been really exciting. So that was the most interesting thing for me in general over the course of the series, was just BLG's adaptation from the upper bracket final to the grand final. Everything else I kind of talked about already on my channel, so I don't have a lot to add. Other than apparently my molding video, me just calling it TS Glazer molds gets more views than
Of course it does.
everything else. So
Rip TES. Yeah.
Real quick, Trespasser.
We'll see. I hope.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say, as still someone who just really likes that team, obviously, like I've really enjoyed watching Mako play for his entire career. Hopefully they'll be able to figure it out, and also hopefully like Cream can stabilize and 369 can figure out whatever is going on, because it was, again, like I know the whole bin 369 argument was already raging through the split, or not raging. It's probably like two people on either side, right? Championing one top laner over the other. But like Bin had an absolute like if you did not think Bin was good before this tournament, like I feel like there's no way you can deny that Bin is good after this tournament. Like he had a career performance at this MSI tournament as like an individual. And so, yeah, I hope that 369 can kind of get his groove back, or as Munchables would say, get his mojo back going into this split. Because I thought, like, not only was he not, again, performing to what he's capable of over the course of the spring, but then he also just did not have that great of a tournament, which made me sad.
Yeah, I still don't really get why 369 was rated so highly. I think the going into the tournament, and I know everyone's gonna be like, why are you retconning? If you look at my top laning scores for the split, I literally had Bin over 369. Okay, I literally did.
For everyone who wants to like hunt you down now.
But I still don't really quite understand, and I think it does come down to like this idea of, okay, we think BLG's bot lane is better, we think BLG's mid is better, we think like basically all of BLG is better, so someone on TES has to be better surely, was I think kind of the reasoning, which is like I had TS's bot lane over BLG's. Yeah. And I do think a lot of it also comes down to like laning, whereas obviously BLG got more bot lane advantages in lane phase. So that, and then 369 played like way more carries because they played like 1-3-1 comps, whereas BLG played way more like front to back comps. Yes. So I think that also is a big factor in it in terms of how it works. And then 369, I think the reason why G2 attacking TES's bot lane was so good is because I've always maintained that if your mid prio is suffering, like, or if you can't play through your bot lane and you can't orchestrate the swaps that were allowing the solo laners to like basically freeze farm and side lane and make sure that they were competitive in the game so that they could play through side, it's like very TES, then they don't have a lot of options. And that's where Jackie Love was kind of going, pick me Draven, I can't lose to these fucking European shitters, pick me Draven, god damn it. And then they first picked Draven, which turned out to be a communicable disease. But anyway, we continue on to
as was Nidalee, as was a lot of there's a lot of things in this.
I think the Nidalee is actually good though. Like I think Nidalee's been good. So it's cool.
I think she's good in I think she's good in certain comps. I grew to like how she was being used with poke, and also if like, again, depends on how the lane swap works, but if the swap gives you that avenue to just power farm way easier, that can also be the case as well. So
speaking of Nidalee, new patch, jungle XP buffed. AP items buffed. What? That's crazy. Anyway, we are going to continue on. Quickly before we switch topics, I think Trespasser wanted to know, Monte Cristo's sentiment is apparently that if TL or G2 can't beat T1 at this tournament where they look the worst they've ever been, then it is pathetic for the West. What is our take on that? I've seen that comment a lot, that T1 looked worse than they have ever been, which is a very interesting sentiment, because I don't necessarily agree with it either. But I'd be curious if we break down that topic first. Is T1 the worst they've ever been?
I feel like they can't be, because there was that year where it was 2018, right? where they didn't. God, it was the Pyrian year.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay,
The
I'm not like, yeah.
I
I have to identify the specific. I think it was 2018, because that was the year that like they didn't make Worlds, and then the Korean teams collapsed at the tournament, and everyone was saying it was the death of the LCK and all this other like doomer stuff. Yeah, and I maintain that KTIG was the best series. I feel like no one should argue with me on that. Anyway. But yeah, I feel like that is probably the worst. That and then like obviously again, and these two things have a very similar thing in common, with Faker not being the starting mid laner. Because this past year, you had the really brief period where Faker was out with an injury. And then there are also rumors that I don't know if these have been confirmed or not, that he might have had an injury at this tournament as well. His like wrist injury is acting up again. But last summer, where they just looked absolutely lost when Faker wasn't starting. I would say anytime Faker hasn't started for T1 is probably the worst they've ever looked. But like that's being really pedantic. I assume what Monty means is like at an international tournament compared to their competition. And in that case, I'm trying to think.
I always think of the 2016 MSI in Shanghai, where they did really terrible in the group stage, and then they got matched against, they got 4th seed coming out of groups, and got matched against Royal, who were 1st seed. And
oh god, yeah.
I actually thought Royal could win, because like, and at that time, the idea that like a Chinese team could beat T1 was like ludicrous, right? But they had a week break, if I recall correctly, or at least a few days. And like Faker did an interview that was where he said like no more Heidi Lau, you know, like implying that they got food poisoning from the Shanghai Heidi Lau. Anyway, the
or like the beef noodle.
The beef for
EDG.
So I always think of that one because I forget what their score was at group stage, but I think they also lost to CLG. But they had the final against CLG, and CLG took 1 game off of them. But people will argue, obviously, that they ramped up, and they did improve between group stage and groups, but there was some consistencies. I would argue that there were consistencies with how T1 played at this MSI and T1's domestic form. I think that answer is like probably the best way to make this argument, is that there was a lot of consistencies between the form of T1 playing versus Genji in the grand final and the form of T1 going into this MSI. And the transmutation I had of this argument is that China looks so bad because they can't even take out this T1, right? They can't even take out this T1 that looks so bad. But this T1, in my opinion, also took Genji to game 5 to 5 games, right? Because I think the things that are consistent between T1 in the grand final and at this MSI is they still had a very dominant kind of laning phase structure, right? And then they still also, like when they were not lane swapping, and they still also had a very similar mid-game approach, right? We will bait Baron, right? We will fight you at Baron, and then we will close out the map while using Baron. That's like literally the T1 formula, right? They were not able to lane swap. Their lane swaps, I think, as much as they adapted in them, they were still not as strong, in my opinion, as pretty much any of the other top 14 lane swaps, like the Genji TS or BLG lane swaps. And they still, it didn't like really help with how they played, right? So that was one factor. The other factor that I would say was an issue is that BLG will do very well against a team that has a very similar formula as them, in my opinion, right? Dominate lanes, play for Baron front to backs. I think that they're very similar. So the argument that like BLG can beat them, Gen G can beat them, I think that it's not fair to say that T1 were significantly worse at this tournament than they were domestically when they took Gen G to 5 games. That's kind of my opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the adaptations they showed were strong because T1 typically, and I mean, I know they gave interviews about this too. They're like, we are kind of really struggling to adapt because this is not the way that we would like to be playing the game. But I also think that because the other part of this is this embarrassing for the West? And I would say it goes back to that question of like, and I know this has been talked about specifically at length with G2 in terms of like how you keep like adapting and like trying to be creative and trying to be as good of a team as you can be to prepare for international competition when your domestic competition and your domestic competitors do not give you that practice. And having like basically being able to maintain a form that when you go to an international boot camp prior to an international event, you'll be able to level up enough during that then you will be a significant threat. And I don't think this tournament, like, I don't know how to explain it, because I wasn't as I wasn't as down on Europe. You and I were not as down on Europe as other people were, like to like start like flat out to establish that baseline. I think you and I were not as like, oh my gosh, Europe is like trash. And obviously G2 themselves had some happy games and they made some like pretty glaring errors even in their own finals that would and were punished by better teams at international competition. But I think I don't think this tournament changed my mind of anything about how difficult it is for a team once reaching their domestic height in NA or EU to then be able to ramp up enough to compete internationally. Like, I think it's always really impressive when a team is able to do that. Like, I think even taking, like, even if you're not considering like, oh, G2 looked insanely competitive in their first series against T1, they decimated TES. Even taking those like match results aside, the way that they were already swapping domestically and the creativity that they brought to the idea of lane swapping and also a lot of their drafts for this competition, I thought showcased a dedication towards really, really trying to improve as much as possible. And I think I don't like the flip side to, oh, it's really embarrassing they wouldn't be able to take out this T1 for me would be like, I really liked some of the things I saw from G2 and TL at this tournament. And I would hope, despite the difficulty that one has, like, especially in NA, to a slightly lesser extent in Europe, I would hope that these two teams are able to keep that obvious like dedication and hunger to be able to then qualify for this Worlds, hopefully boot camp against better teams enough to then have a chance to make some noise, because I always think that's really interesting. But I also think like the degree of difficulty is just as difficult as it was previously, if that makes sense. That was a lot of words in a very rambling thing, but hopefully I'm making sense.
I think on this topic, what I will say is I still maintain that this was probably the strongest parity MSI that we've had in a couple years in terms of the top teams presenting. The fact that you had G2 go to 5 versus T1 and 3-0 TS, the fact that you had TL like actually showing like good strategies, playing lane swaps very well versus T1, and improving throughout the course of the tournament. to demonstrate stronger performances is like it's one of the highest parity MSIs I think we've had since maybe like 2019 or something along those lines, right? So I think that's how I feel about it. So I was very surprised that the response was it's very embarrassing for the West because I remember last year pretty much every EU and NA team was just getting slammed. You know, it didn't matter. And I don't think T1 are significantly worse this tournament than their domestic forms. So, yeah, that is my TLDR there. All right, cool. I think we should move on because we have kind of a lot for this one. Have you had a chance to kind of look at the new batch at all for the new season batch?
Really, really briefly. I was going to do more homework on it later.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaways I have for it is I do think the teleport boots are kind of underrated. I do understand the argument that you don't get it until you've done basically backed and walked back out of base like 4 times, right? You don't really get the upgrade until then. But I think the upgrade is really worth for mid laners especially. I do understand that you probably aren't going to make the trade-off for Sorks, but there have been like some fun moments where people have had bases when they shouldn't have bases. They've managed to like have really high move speed, etc. So I think that's super fun. I think supports might be interested in building them. The other option is the other thing that's really disgusting is just like how broken the dot based mid laners are. Like, I was having a conversation with Ariandel, who plays like a lot of ASOL, and he was saying that he doesn't even build like the new Blackfire because Leandri's Rylai's is still broken on ASOL. Like, so the options are just still really gross still. Like, you just have a lot of really good AP items. I think Blackfire is disgusting and should be built on most champs. So I think that's like AP mids are going to be really strong. And then jungle XP is the big one for me. I think it'll be a lot more valid to play for jungle now, especially in mid game when you're opening map. You'll see a lot more instances when you're opening maps specifically for enemy jungle camps than you did before. Also, bot lane spikes, you'll hit those faster with XP changes to duo. So probably will break that down mathematically at some points to know exactly when, but those are the most interesting things for me. The other thing is like the fighter items. So I think we'll probably get like AP mages, fighters top, and then like scaling jungle with you might open up more bot picks just because of the way XP works too. So yeah, it'll be very interesting.
The thing I'm the most curious about is jungle picks and how that's going to affect jungling, because I feel like there are a lot of junglers who have been, let's say, crying out to be able to play like farming carries, so we'll see.
Oh, also IEPD is back like 1-2.
Oh yeah,
because Emily Rand is an ADC man, so you know we have to let her know. Because I don't know what we gave IE like free 30 gold or free 30 AD for, and then we also took crit off of like AD off of like a ton of other items to go back to when basically all of the attack speed items just built attack speed effectively. So you're still getting like crit attack speed from these items, and then you're getting most of your base AD from like the IE. I don't know. It's very silly. I don't know why we're doing this, but basically everything is strong
because
we're Dota now. Everything is strong. Yay.
And I like, not to go on like a super tangent, but like I actually prefer that to like nerfing things. So I know that's not a design philosophy that like a lot of people like, but I actually enjoy that a lot more if everything is OP than as opposed to like nerfing things. But that's just like a personal thing. I know a lot of people disagree with that.
It feels very annoying when you have so much damage and you can't one-shot things though. So we'll see how that balance works out. Also the Warmogs is very funny, but yeah, we'll see how that all pans out. I think it's very interesting. Yeah, I expect there to be a lot more teams specifically playing around jungle since it was heading there anyway. All right. So, in the interest of moving faster, let's talk about roster change. We'll open with LPL because they are starting on June 1st. I will still be co-streaming. Let's see. I don't know why I'm only getting like some of your audio. Do you have like a noise gate or something?
Not that I know of, but my audio preferences have been known to change themselves with every. Here, I'll just turn that up. Is that better?
I don't know if you turning it up
Maybe.
is the turning up does not help. Okay, here we go.
Hello.
Because
Does that help?
It's not that
I
you're
moved the location.
It's not that you're quiet.
Yeah,
it's just every once in a while it doesn't pick up what you're saying. Like your lips move, and I don't see what you're saying. That's all.
Yeah. I don't have noise suppression on or audio gating. So
Well,
we'll see.
I turned you down a bit because you turned yourself up to compensate. So
sorry.
It's all good.
There we go. Who knows?
But yeah, all right, cool. So we've got LPL roster changes. I think the most notable one that people will point to is the Weibo roster change with Breathe and Tarzan. I think we talked about it very briefly before. I don't really have anything new to say. It's kind of the same.
Yeah. I don't really like this team still, in my opinion, needs Xiaohu to be performing, and that didn't really happen during the spring split. So I think, I don't know, they're still going to have some.
And I think
some issues. I don't know.
The most interesting thing for me is going to be just, again, this team doesn't really play to fight. They play like really hard play sides, and then they still don't play sides as well as CS, for example. So we'll see if it changes, because I think Breathe is another person who doesn't like call things around his lane very much, and Tarzan just farms. So I think you'll still be in a situation where you're kind of like scaling for mid-game and then playing through sides and avoiding direct confrontation, especially if your mid isn't performing more. But it is nice because I do think Breathe was a very strong player, and if you're playing around bot more, he can be a strong player without like being a massive player, which I think is what RNG needed him to be. I had Breathe in as like my third team all pro, so it is kind of cool that he is getting an opportunity to play on Weibo. Do I think this team will necessarily be super insanely much better than they were? No, I don't really think so. And yeah, I'm fine if I'm wrong, but it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Cool.
I'm trying to think. I feel like the other big one is probably, well, not EDG isn't big, but like
the EDG.
They've officially kind of? Yeah, they've officially just ended their like, we are not doing the full rookie experiment anymore. So it's not GIJ and the kids. Yeah. Kind of. It's essentially like solo kill is coming into top lane, but then Cryan and Wink will be on the presumably on the starting lineup, and then Leave will also be their starting ADC.
Yeah.
I don't.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say this team is not as interesting to me as the all rookie team. As sad as that sounds.
Way less fun to watch, but I do like Wink. I feel like Wink many times was hard carrying IG, even though it felt like he who shall not be made got the props.
Oh no.
The drama is just so funny, actually. But yeah, so again, like IG is changing jungle. We've got Tianjin back to starting. I think the funniest thing for IG for me is like Nani is playing mid. Because Cryan is going to EG, and Nani was actually playing mid for their youth team. So he did okay, but it should be a downgrade. And then they have Vampire. They just did a full support swap, so I don't know. It'll be very interesting if IG manages to win games. That's all I'm saying.
The Vampire swap was very confusing to me, but
But we'll see. I don't know if this makes EDG like that much better though. That's the thing. I really
No.
don't know. And then I think a lot of people are really excited about AL. But AL again was very much like no Azir, no win, because they tanked really hard after Azir got eliminated. So it's another situation where it's like, if your mid jungle isn't synergizing and performing well, is a top lane change going to be a big deal for you, right? That's kind of the question.
I mean, I will say this. Obviously, this is like really old evidence, but when Kroko looked his best on Sandbox, it was actually around playing for Summit on top side. So I'd be curious to see if they just kind of completely lean into that playstyle maybe and just try to like slam top for Ollie to carry. Obviously, I don't see Ollie as a super similar player to Summit in certain regards, but I would be curious to see if that would be an avenue they'd pursue, only because I thought he and Summit worked really well together because he knew when to go top, essentially, and then Summit would just take over the lane.
Obviously,
this was also years ago, so.
And obviously, like, Tabe came in for AL towards the end of spring to coach, and so a lot of people will be excited for that reason. I think in general, like, AL's roster should have performed better than they did. So if they do, like, end up being kind of middle of the pack, I won't be surprised, but I'm still not having insanely high hopes for them. I think they could realistically aim for like top 5. I think it's realistic for them, but we'll see how it goes. IG is funny. They did just sell everyone, which, I mean, that's like very much in line with how Wang Zizong should operate, right? Which is like, he has always been more profit oriented. They always do internal developments, and then they very rarely like the biggest thing ever was buying Rookie and Cacao, right? That was like actually a very, very random change of their strategy. When typically they just grab like really young players, try to give them a shot, and then hope for the best. So, I mean, it's also not surprising from that perspective that they're going with many mids. Because whatever, man. Like, he spent some time for our cat team. We're gonna throw him into LPL now. Seems good. Yeah, I think that's most of it. I guess we could maybe talk about RNG. That's a roster of all time for sure. I'm surprised Ming stayed. That's my biggest surprise.
I mean, that's been my biggest surprise for a really long time.
I thought he would just straight up retire. Because, like, I swear every speech is like, maybe I'll retire, you know? Like, seems good. So.
I mean, so wait, how do you feel about Xiaopeng becoming head coach under Kenzu?
I mean, I don't know anything about Xiaopeng as a coach. It's whatever.
I want it to reflect his gameplay. I want his coaching style to reflect his gameplay. Anyway, Huanfeng Ming is going to be like really weird to me. And then ZDZ joining top.
Huanfeng is a very weird guy. For obvious reasons, but I mean, he was like always a good AD. He's kind of like Fofo, where I don't like talking about Huanfeng anymore, but he played well for as long as he played, so it is what it is. So I expect it to be decent. I think I will say about RNG, people was like I think people overblamed LWX. Because if you watch those games, I'm literally just sitting here like, how is LWX supposed to auto-attack anything in these situations? He's just not. And then everyone's just like, but he's dying. It's like, well, his job is not to live here. His job is to create space and then have his soloids carry. They're not doing that. So, yeah. I don't know.
I feel like that's a hallmark of LWX's existence
His
in
job
LPL.
is never to carry. Like, that's the thing, though. It's like when you're roster building, LWX's job is to just, like, occupy attention of other people and not actually carry. And that has always been his role, and he's gotten ridiculously underrated in the meantime. But, I mean, Huanfeng actually can carry without a lot of attention. So you'd think that if they kept Breathe, like, maybe they can play around top, but they're not going to play around top with Breathe. I think with ZDZ, they are unironically more likely to play around top. So even if ZDZ is mechanically worse. So we'll see how it goes. I mean...
That's actually so funny.
I'm here for it. They sold Breathe. They made some money, you know? It's chill. I think, like, for RNG, as far as I could tell, their main MO is, like, making some money right now, which, for me, just, like, sell everyone. But maybe they probably tanked everyone's brand, like, way too much with Spring, because no one looked good except Breathe. So it's kind of hard to sell them at this point. Yeah. I mean, I don't have a lot else to say.
Yeah. I mean, I think looking at the lineups, the teams I'm most curious about didn't, or like, so based on what we saw this past spring, right? I think the breakout story was definitely of FPX and Milky Way and just how they played around jungle. And they are one of the teams where I'm looking at some of the jungle changes and I'm like super, super curious to see where they end up in like the LPL hierarchy. Obviously, we are going to have a completely different type of like tournament this summer. So I don't even know. Yeah, like I don't even know how to feel about like or make any predictions until I see like what actually happens, right, for the summer season, because what they call like summer placements is the first part, which is like the group fearless stage, right? So and that's what starts on June 1st, which is this weekend.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's going to be interesting.
I have a lot of opinions about the format and everything, and what I'll probably do is talk about it in more detail. I'm going to try to co-stream Old Man Cup because why not? So I'll probably use that as an excuse to talk about a bunch of LPL things. And
maybe I'll hop on a few of those. Old Man Cup drama has been
very funny.
Insanely hilarious.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. And then go from there to just But well, basically, like, there's a lot of conversation to be had about the new LPL season, so we'll probably not fit everything into the show. But if you are interested in talking more about that, check out the co-streams and the streams that I do up until then. And I'll probably do not a video, but a blog post, because I honestly didn't expect it to start so soon on the new LPL format. So, yeah. I think the other stuff is... All right, let's talk about LCS, because I think that that's, like, probably where some of the weirdest shit has happened. I don't know. I guess you could debate whether or not LPL or LCS shit is weirder, but I feel like LCS shit is slightly weirder.
Well, I mean, most of it is literally around one team, right? Because we did, since it was announced so early, we did have time to talk about Thanatos. So, like, if you're interested in Thanatos or how he might work on C9, we already talked about that in a previous episode before MSI even started, because that came out like first week of April, I think, or somewhere around there. So but yeah, the big news is obviously, like, I'm just gonna mention it because it's not like a big thing, but it's a player I cared about, is that Someday actually announced his official retirement. So that's happened. And then obviously the big shakeup, and I think the only other thing that's really happened, right, are all the Dig roster moves, because it's Rich becoming a free agent, Licorice is going to be the top, Treats is coming in as the coach. Zven is going to be playing bot. And there's a rumor that
2 rumors,
Jensen,
right?
Yeah, is going to be playing mid. So
yeah, and then that one also comes off of the FlyQuest conversation, which is that they're promoting quad, right? So which is
also not officially confirmed.
Yeah, not officially confirmed. Speculated in general. So I think that that's worth noting. For me, I guess we can start there if you'd like to talk about the quad stuff. And quad is good. I think anyone who thinks that this is like a result of the drama from Inspired and MSI is crazy, because objectively speaking, if you are paying a salary that allows you to import a player, you're realistically investing in that player as a potential promotion piece. And I think that this is something that was a possibility basically from the start. Maybe they didn't want to do it this summer, but I'm pretty sure that Jensen was considered a placeholder piece from the beginning. Anyway, so that's like kind of my feeling on it. And I think there's a lot of speculation that there's a lot of internal drama on FlyQuest, but it's probably literally just down to we're going to promote quad. Feel free to play for Academy or find another team. There's no way Jensen's ever going to play for Academy. Find another team. Hooray! So.
I mean, obviously, from the NACL matches I was able to watch, quad looked really good. He's gonna bring a lot of different stuff than Jensen. I think like Jensen is obviously not at the peak of his career, but I also do think he can bring a lot to a team that people underestimate, I guess. And I think he can be very stable, like given the obvious champion pool that he has and like the playstyle he has. So it's just going to be a very different dynamic. And the thing that I would say to look out for, and this is just based on like things that Inspired and the team have kind of talked about publicly, with like Inspired specifically being such a huge part of their like overall shot calling and gameplay. They talked about how he would be in giving a lot of like instructions to the bot lane, because obviously Masu is a rookie, Busio is in his second year, and so I think that is only like if that was a problem for them going to international, right? Where like suddenly he has even more on his plate because he's going up against better opponents and he's still trying to give all of this like early game direction to his lanes. That could be increased or exacerbated by the fact that quad is also going to be, you know, in his like rookie debut, right? So that would be something I'd be watching out for, only because the team did mention that that was like one of Inspired's main duties on this roster. And that might mean that he has to give direction to another person, where he might not have had to do that with Jensen, because Jensen is like an incredibly experienced player. So any sort of friction between them, I think, would have come more from varying ideas of how to play the game. Whereas if this is a role that Inspired has on the team, he's adding essentially one more person that he's probably going to be giving very specific instructions to. So I don't know. It will be like a big change in team dynamic, I think, before you even start getting into potential like communication issues. So
that's a nice narrative. However, Inspired for sure was micromanaging Jensen anyway, because Inspired just micromanages everyone in comps. So I don't think it will add another person, because he literally will just give instructions to everyone. That is kind of like how he operates in comms. I've said this before. Like, he is a very knowledgeable individual player, and he always has a very clear idea of how he wants the game to go. He will be able to say to his bot lane, like, play aggressive here or whatever, depending on timing, and to set up a play. He'll be able to say like this. He even said in the interview that a lot of people said was very harsh, and I mean, I have a lot of mixed feelings on it, because I always do think like you can't really criticize. I don't think you should criticize your teammate publicly, but I also think it wasn't like a lot of the backlash came from him like talking shit about Quad and people attributing that to him flaming Jensen, when I think it was like probably more middle ground. Not Quad, Quid, sorry. This is not going to get confusing. But yeah, he shit talked Quid in that interview. But like, he even said in the interview that he specifically tries to tell like Jensen to do this or to do XYZ, right? So he's already kind of saying that. I think it won't change too much from him. I don't know if Quad is, because like again, they want the mids to play make more, right? It seems like. But I don't think Quad is necessarily going to be an insane playmaker. I think Quad does a very good job, like kind of walking forward to use his HP bar to like tank damage and split damage, and makes room and spice in fights better than Jensen. But I don't necessarily think he's like an insane, oh, I'm going to flash at you from angle. I'm going to see this angle no one else does. Like, I don't necessarily think he's going to be that kind of player, but I think he'll lane well. And he'll play front to backs pretty well. So I think that's probably what you can expect from Quad. I think Jensen sort of does that, but to a lesser extent. So to me, it just feels like an upgrade generally, as long as comms are fine. Also, allegedly, based on communication with the Academy team, Quad already does talk a lot on the Academy team. Good. He's also a very instructional leader. FlyQuest Academy's macro is kind of a train wreck, but still, like, they have a sense of direction, right? From Chime, and Quad is usually kind of the second person that they attribute it to.
That's good.
So I think that's, at least in mid-game. So I think those are like kind of the two things that I would expect from the FlyQuest change.
I mean, that's kind of exciting to watch, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it'll be very interesting how it goes. But yeah, I think like I will say like the very nice thing about what Inspired does is he makes it very easy for the team to play in a lot of regular season and practice, right? He makes it very easy to find a direction. Obviously, FlyQuest said at the start of the split that, you know, we all kind of like got on the same page on how to play it, the early split. I would not be surprised if that page was Inspired. And they just kind of played out the game like that. So I think that's it. Do I necessarily think the mid upgrade will make them a first place LCS team? No. I don't necessarily think that that's what it's going to do, but I think it'll be very interesting to see how it develops. So, yeah.
I was just reminded that I need to do, like, going into LCS season, I'm going to have to do another power ranking. Blech.
I love power rankings. Hooray.
The dog agrees with me. Anyway.
Hooray.
Dig roster as is.
Yep. Talk about that one.
I did want to say, like, I am excited to see Zven back in the LCS. Obviously, I enjoy working with him a lot, like, as a broadcaster. And I think whenever he wants to retire, he obviously has a future in broadcasting if he wants it. So I'm throwing that out there. But there's also another person on this team that I would say has that, which is Treats, who's stepping into the coach position. But the most interesting thing to me is obviously going to be Licorice Top, and then the whole Pika XU thing is... God, I don't even know how to get into it, because I don't think this is it? It's not officially confirmed, right? It's just XU kind of confirmed it himself.
Yeah, off.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And also it's been reported, I think. I'm not sure. Anyway.
Yeah, so like I'm not surprised it happened. I'm really sad it happened, not because I like heavily favor XU over Spica or whatever, but I think like I'm glad that Spica found a team, but also I don't like how XU was treated, and I also think like we're in such a precarious position right now, in my opinion, in NA specifically, more than any other region. I think we just don't have a lot of talent upcoming. I don't think a lot of young people play League of Legends in North America at all.
Yeah.
And I also think like a lot of things. So like even before Academy and like NACL started getting gutted, and before, it's been a year since the MSI like change when we were all at MSI, and suddenly it's announced that NA teams are not going to be are not going to have to field challenger rosters, and so you know, we had everyone kind of dropping their Academy challenger teams, except for TL and FlyQuest. So shout out to them. But like, I think like even before that, there's like a whole, you can trace a lot of like either just poor decision making or inattention to how to organically grow a player base that is competitive, like aka wants to be competitive, as opposed to playing it a lot more casually to begin with. We've covered like a lot of these things with the initial play versus contract and like no outreach towards high schools, and the inability to recognize that like at least the United States specifically, much more than a lot of other countries, doesn't have a social safety net. So you talk to players like, for example, Santorin, when I talked to him and I was doing like a giant career article, or Zven Skarin, who both said like, yeah, we, you know, coming out of school, we have like these gap years that we can take, right? And we can take risks because of that. We don't have to worry about like not being able to find a place should we have to go back to school because the esports career didn't work out. So I think it's a lot of like, it's a myriad factors, right? But now you are in such a precarious situation where you have a player like XU, who I think, in my opinion, overperformed compared to my initial expectations of him. Like I was excited to see him, but my expectations were like pretty tempered based on what I'd seen from him. And I really liked a lot of the things I saw from XU, right? Like I liked that they really found a plan around bot lane. Obviously part of that I think was because he did have difficulty communicating with his top side, but like I really liked a lot of things. I thought he grew as a player. I wanted to see him further grow with like more veteran presences around him. And he is the type of player that you don't want to lose at this point, right? Because like you like don't have a lot of people coming up in the system, and I thought he showed like actual growth throughout the split, and to kind of see that stopped down fully just sucks, right? Yep. And that's nothing against Spica, because again, like I am glad that Spica found a team, because Spica was another person who was like kind of hanging out, like very organically grown North American talent from when he was at Scouting Grounds onward, and he was scouted by Echo Fox, and I think he was still like 16. But like the fact that we're in this position makes that loss like feel really palpable to me, for as like a complete outsider to this.
So obviously I find it very annoying that this happens, because it's not worth it, right? It's not worth it to get into tier 2 in NA. It's just not. Like, and a lot of people will say, oh, it should be hard to go from tier 2 to tier 1. I mean, I agree with that. I 100% agree. It should be hard. Like, it should not be a free thing that you get to do to play for LCS. It should matter. It should be worth something. I 100% agree. But what is going to get you the job is the idea that it's like, if I grind, if I put a lot of work into my brand, if I do all of these things, then I will get noticed, I will get an opportunity, is I think just no longer true, right? And it's like very, 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 very minuscule, like 0.00001%. And it's not like with And already in pro sports, people say don't put all your eggs in the sports basket. But if you're getting scouted by sports teams, you can get an education, right, along the way. You can do all those things. But right now, the pathway of getting pro is still very much like take time off from school, all in on esports, do everything to all in on esports, and hope for the best. And hope that your parents will then pay for you to go back to college, right? That's literally the pathway right now. And it's like you cannot actually... Realistically speaking, you do not necessarily get to kind of like stratify your baskets, which is why I was so happy that I got to help out with like the collegiate broadcast that Hawk and Grapes put on, because I think that is like the way that we have to kind of try to fix things in NA. And I know Riot has been very anti like merging tier 2 and collegiate for a very long time. But I think that will probably change. So yeah, I think that's like the big difference for me. It's like, yes, it is hard. It is supposed to be hard. I get that. But it is also just now not at all realistic or an intelligent thing to do with your life, even remotely at all, you know? Like that's just the way it is now. So it's very tricky. I think the big thing for me is outside of that, just looking at this roster. Remember last year in spring, 2023, when everyone was like, damn, they got a steal. I can't believe these players were available. They've got like Santorin and Jensen and Armit, you know? Oh my god, this roster looks so good. Holy shit. Like, Spawn was doing well in Academy. Oh my god, they've got, like, Ignar and crap. Like, oh my god, this roster's gonna be... Oh my god, guys. Do you remember what that roster placed? Do you remember? I remember what that roster placed. I don't know if you do. It was last. It was last. Good. Nice. I'm not saying that I think this roster will place last, but I think that going for the brand value players is expect that your roster is going to be a brand value team and not necessarily a winning team. And that's it. That's all.
Yeah. And I'm curious. I mean, I'm still curious to see this roster also, just because, like, again, Zven coming back is really interesting to me, and Licorice coming back is really interesting to me. And Spica coming back is really interesting. It's just, I'm not sure how they'll all work together either, which is another thing that I will be curious to see.
Yeah. I think it is definitely an interesting one, because I do think, like, you can look at this and you can say, okay, but, like, Jensen looks good. Licorice was all pro top from last year, right? Mm-hmm. Spica, oh my god, I can't believe Spica didn't get a team. It's a crime, even though pretty much everyone and their mother was blaming him for FlyQuest being last place in summer last year, but apparently it's still a crime. He was not on a team. I'm not saying it's his fault, okay? I did not blame him, but it is, like, kind of weird to me that it felt like, okay, I always talk about the Vegas experiment, right? Where it's like whoever was on X team during X period, they get a Vegas pass. Like, whatever happened in FlyQuest 2023 summer doesn't leave FlyQuest 2023 summer, right? That's just the way it is. Like, these players don't deserve to carry it with them. But it is actually interesting to me that there are basically, like, zero consequences. Outside of the fact that Spica was teamless for a bit, but, like, every single player otherwise on the team got, like, a really, really high caliber offer other than Spica going into the next split, right? You had Impact go to FlyQuest, or mm-hmm. Not Impact, sorry, wow. Yeah, Impact went to TL, right?
Yeah.
You had Vikla and Prince going to, like, Chinese teams, right? Getting opportunities there, which many people would argue is like a better chance at getting to a world's birth that does something, right? You have Vulcan going to C9, right? And then Spica, like, it was honestly for Spica, it was a matter of time before he got another offer, right? That's how it feels. But it's like at some point you have to kind of say, wow, it really doesn't matter, right? If you've if you've locked in your top winning roster, or you've been on a winning team before, then that will matter more than how your most recent performance looked. Generally speaking, I feel like. And that's kind of how this Dig roster feels to me, because it is very much like Jensen, Spica, we've got Licorice from Golden Guardians, we've got Zven, who hasn't played for a while, but it is a lot of brand value, right? It is a lot of brand value on this roster. So that's not necessarily a terrible thing, but you know that when you're putting the roster together, that's basically what you're putting it together for, is the brand value. Not necessarily a guarantee that it'll perform well.
See, I think the two things I'm most excited about are Zven, Isles, bot. I think that's going to be interesting. I just want to see Zven back in competitive again. And then whether Licorice was able to maintain his form from his kind of insane glow up on GG.
It's interesting because we do have to say, like, what do we know about these players, right? I think Licorice, I think to an extent this roster does make sense together, because Licorice, what do we know about Licorice? He's always fine taking a blind pick, right? That was kind of his role in Golden Guardians. He'll take blind pick. We know about Zven. If you talk to Vulcan, if you talk to a lot of people who are on rosters with him when he played AD, he talked a lot about how he would call a lot of resources for bot dives and give the team to that kind of sense of direction, right? So that's within the context of his personality. It's because obviously played with Double Lift. That's all we have to say. And then of course you have like the Jensen dynamic, and he'll just wave clear mid and stall out the game for someone else for AD to carry, or he'll enable team fights, and you get like a very clear sort of front to back identity. I don't know how well Licorice will fit into a front to back identity, since I don't think that's necessarily his style, but I mean, he's made it work before, so you definitely have that opportunity. The big question mark I think a lot of people have will be Isles, just because he doesn't necessarily fit in place, but Isles and Tomo won a lot of laning phases on this Dig team. So I think they'll have like the same kind of approach to a strong laning phase. I actually had
also Zven and Isles played together, right? Before on
they did. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of these players have played together before also, but I think the big thing for me is like, or tangentially, I think the big thing for me is just it does kind of make some sense on paper. The biggest question mark for me is how mid-game with Zven and Licorice will go, because I think Licorice does like to play for side, and Zven very much like, if you're not hovering him on mid-wave, he will kind of pays it up. By that I mean like overextend to hit wave high when he doesn't need to hit wave high. So I think that'll be an interesting one if that hasn't changed. But otherwise, I think like the roster does make sense on paper, but I don't necessarily think that they put thought into putting it together from that perspective. I think it was very much a brand value roster build. So, yeah. I am also just like, it is also just very funny to me that Bakery can go on Twitter in literally the same offseason and say that XU is a long-term piece and Rich is the best player in the league, and that Tomo got robbed and was insanely underrated within the span of like half a season. Say all those three things, and then all those players are gone. Anyway. Yay! We love it. We love League of Legends. But yeah, I don't necessarily expect them to be last place again. I think that would be kind of crazy. But I don't think that they're going to suddenly be like a top team in the league. So we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. All right. Any other NA roster things we want to talk about? I think that was most of it.
No, I think because the only other like really big one is Thanatos, right? And we already kind of discussed that.
So the other one is going to be LEC, which I think you can kind of put the LCS and LEC roster changes in sort of the same basket in the sense that they are very much for like a narrative or a brand, right? In the sense that a lot of the LEC roster changes are just get Koreans, and that's the tagline. So, yeah, curious. I do think, because we did talk before about the Vladdy change of it.
Yeah, we talked about Vladdy and Closer, right?
Yeah, we talked
We
about
touched upon Closer because Closer had already, yeah.
Yeah, because that came out like literally while we were doing the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Abadage allegedly wanted to be on the academy team, which is a fun one. But yeah, it's again like that one. I don't know. I think the very interesting one for me is Giant X, the Antonio.
I mean, he's been around for a while, right?
It's
so like I will say like I do not know him as a player super well beyond like
Shogath got buffed.
Yeah. Oh my god. I don't know him as a player super well beyond like memes that people would make on Twitter. I think I'm not sure what to expect in terms of like because Odo is still on the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, the way contracts work in Europe is you keep paying them, unlike in NA, where you don't keep paying them. You just fire people with no consequence.
oh my god.
So it's actually way harder.
Yeah, but theoretically, Odo could still start, right? If it doesn't like, I guess I don't know like how they're going to approach this, right? Because like replacing Odo Omna seems odd to me, but maybe that's just me. Maybe I like think too highly of him compared to like what his actual play was this past split, but. I just consider him a very intelligent player.
I think Odo is smart. I don't necessarily think he had like an insane split or anything. I don't necessarily think you're going to upgrade him, though.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of my thing. Is like I don't.
Yeah.
Like I look at these two names, and obviously I'm fully admitting like I have not seen the Antonio performance like as of late, and I don't know as much like nearly as much about him as I do Odo, right? But like I think
it's for sure not a performance-based swap. It is the Antonio has been one of the most popular players in the Spanish scene for many years, and he has a very strong following. Plus, if you just want your top laner to play tanks, you may as well just get the Antonio, get some Spanish fans on the lineup, call it a day, GG. See you next year. I mean, it is like they're not performing well, right? So you're realistic about the fact that you're not a contending roster, right? Giant X. If you're realistic about the fact that you're not a contending roster currently, then I think you just go with a roster change that you think will like attract a certain amount of fandom. And maybe you're having some internal, I don't know if this is true or not, this is pure speculation, just to clarify. Maybe you're having like some internal arguments on the team and you need to make a roster change. This one makes sense because top lane is a fake role and not real and doesn't actually impact the game. RIP bin 2024 MSI. So for that perspective, it makes sense that they would make a change like this, right? It is more a brand related one. I think it's not bad from that perspective. Because the problem is like, yes, Odo is a better player, but does keeping Odo on your roster win you anything? Probably not. Does changing Odo out win you anything? Probably not. So let's just see what else we can get from it. I think it's way more that kind of business decision, in my opinion. The other ones like oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say I think the only other like really big one that we haven't talked about is Linkus, right?
Yeah, we didn't talk about Linkus and we didn't talk about Rahel.
Oh yeah, the SK.
Yeah.
The SK rumors, yeah. Although Rahel was actually announced,
yeah,
I think.
Rahel is confirmed, yeah. The allegedly they changed 80 as well, though that one hasn't been announced or confirmed.
Support, you mean?
No, allegedly.
That's Rahel is the 80.
Oh yeah, sorry. Allegedly they changed support as well. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because they moved DOS officially to SK Prime with Neon.
Yeah.
Which, in fairness, I did say if you don't change support as well as 80, it's a waste. So I think you had to change support. I don't think DOS performed that well. But yeah, that's what it's looking like. I'm not. I guess like Linkus is interesting. I think there was like the drama. Did we talk about this a little bit? The Linkus drama that he was throwing. The rumor was he was like throwing EMA Masters because he's leaving K Corp, but I think that was just completely wrong. So, not really worth.
I don't think we talked about it, but it was like it was very distant on my periphery.
Yeah, I don't think it was really worth addressing, so it's fine if we didn't talk about it. I think the Linkus one, Linkus is interesting. Do I think that this makes the like it is also very relevant because Vitality is a team that we talked about like we liked watching them play. We thought there was a chance that they could make a run, right? Mm-hmm. Especially in summer. And this team is like pretty relevant towards the top. So I think the Linkus change is interesting. I think Linkus is good. I don't necessarily is an upgrade over Douglas, but I'm not sure how well it'll translate. So we'll see how it goes. What do you think? What roster change do you think Vitality would have to make to be a contending team? Or what change or what improvements do they need?
I don't know. To be honest, like I still think this team is like still really interesting to me, regardless of like. Yeah. But I don't see them. Like I still like their bot side, yes, even with like people really, really ragging on Hillsong. Yeah, I don't know what changes they would make, honestly. I don't see this as like obviously the big dramatic change already kind of happened. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I'd do, honestly.
I hope that it helps the jungle synergy for them. I think that would help a lot. The other thing, I'm gonna double check this real quick because I don't typically think of BTO as a mage, like a super insane mage player. So I don't feel like the meta should be super good for him, but I could be completely talking out of my ass, but I don't really think of him that way. Let me think. I'm just looking at his all-time to see if I'm being completely silly, but because I always think of him as more of like a LeBlanc player. The way like when I was watching BTO a lot when he was coming up was he would like be very good at kind of setting up for decent flank angles, and then like sometimes the execution would get a little scuffed, or he would do one or the other. But he was very much like his skill was very much in flanking and then playing like for those flank angles, and kind of like finding his way out of weird situations with positioning. So I don't necessarily think of him as an insane mage player. So I think that the meta change could be bad for them. But yeah.
Yeah, the two champions I associate with him the most are, I'd say, LeBlanc and Nikali, which are definitely not, standard stereotypical mages.
Yeah, I just wanted to double
so
check
we'll see.
because I don't know. I don't want to say something wrong about a player. Anyway, it'll be very interesting to see how they play, but I think they might, even with Linkus, I think they might have a harder time this split if the meta goes the way that I think it will go. Unless Linkus turns out to be like the most insane, and then they play around him really well, right? Which I could see happening.
Yeah.
Right? If you're playing around Linkus really well, better than you played around Douglas, then I could see T Vitality having like a huge change. But I do think how they approach that roster change will be the most important thing. Yeah. Cool. I think that's most of the roster change stuff, right? A lot of roster change. Yeah. Unless you wanted to talk about like any LCK changes, because there's the DRX one and some streamers becoming coaches.
Yeah.
I don't know, shit like
it's
that.
like a lot of coaching changes, and then the only like big one was Kiahu and Satab, which I don't think is going to be a massive change, but maybe someone who watches a lot more challengers than me will see that differently. But yeah, I don't think it radically changes the team. I think it's probably just an attempt to maybe inject something into the roster.
There were
we'll see.
A couple questions in chat that I want to get to before we move on. One is from Callan Fox, which is, but do you think TL, Spawn, and Dodo have the structure to maintain the MSI level play at home? Meaning, like, specifically referencing the idea that they'll come back to NA and do well, things like that. So,
yeah, I mean, I think TL specifically with Spawn, like Spawn is a very disciplined coach, I'll say. And so I think the big thing with that is that whatever they did work on, I think they will definitely try to be as mindful of it as possible. I also thought a lot of really good things, like specifically the good things we saw from TL internationally were in particular the way that their bot lane played, especially Jan, I thought played really, really well. So that's something I would definitely want to see them continue to try to like hone in and improve on. I do think they have like the infrastructure for it, definitely. And I know like they're massive grinders, right? So then it's just a matter of like, is the grind going to help or hurt us? And like, how do we try to continue to, again, because like, if you're grinding, and I know you've talked about this specifically, and other coaches have talked about it too. If you're grinding constantly, but against worse opponents, and you're already in the position that you're at the top, occasionally it can be actually worse to continue to like grind yourself into dust in that way. So I think I will be really curious to see if there is a dip in their play. But as for whether they have like the infrastructure and the people in place to try to maintain it, like I do think they absolutely do. And I think their players seem very internally motivated. And by that, I mean, they seem more to me based on their individual like attitudes towards the game. Like, again, people rag on APA all the time, but like he is a fucking grind lord. And so is Jan, right? And so I think they already have, like, I think and I said this publicly on the MSI, one of the MSI desks that we were talking about, G2, where I think you have to be internally motivated, right? Like you can't rely on external validation as much if you're going to try to stay focused on international play. And I do think, again, they have the infrastructure and a lot of their players seem like very internally motivated, which is a good thing. So if they come up against obstacles domestically, they should be able to address them because they'll always see it as like, I need to improve myself, if that makes sense. I will turn myself down.
Yeah, I mean, she turned herself up so that because I said she was cutting, and then for some reason, I mean,
we always have
didn't
audio
help.
issues.
Yeah,
The hallmark
woo!
of the program.
I think the main thing for me is yes, and I think they'll be structured about it. The biggest concern with TL is unironically just burnout. I think it's very easy to feel like you can keep going, right? And then you don't really notice you're hitting a wall until you hit one. That's the biggest thing, and I think it happened to an extent in GC 2019. So I remember there was a famous interview with Perks where he said it got to the point where in the final, like, I almost just wanted it to be over, right? I didn't necessarily want to win as much as I did, right? I kind of just wanted it to be over. And when you are playing that many series, right? This was when they were going for the Royal Road, right? They had Spring 1, they won MSI, they won Summer, and then they played all the way to the World's Final, right? When you do, sometimes it just does catch up with you. So that would be my biggest concern. I know the Spawn usually goes home, right? Whenever he can. So that will be a good thing for if the players do the same, right? If they take some time. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I hope they can maintain it. I do think like it's very much in their personalities. Like APA and Jan have always been that way. Obviously, like Impact and Core have been playing for a very long time. They know how it goes. You know, I don't know as much about Umti, but he came very highly recommended from Impact. So
yeah, the thing about Umti is like I think he is definitely a player who's internally motivated because he has had a lot of setbacks in his career, right? Like he has been on teams where he literally said in an interview about Brion, like, we are going to show you what a team of like people who don't have anything to lose looks like, right? So like I think he is incredibly internally motivated. Otherwise he wouldn't still be playing just based on like what I know of him and his career, which is a really good which is a really good thing for this team.
And I think what Sprawn kind of brings, because TL's mindset was very much grind as much as possible from last year, but I think what Spawn brings is like a sense of structure to the grind. So I do think that is relevant. So yeah,
he'll make sure Jan is actually drinking water and eating food.
Potentially, yeah. So there's that one. I think the other question that I got was why is there like so much faith in Zven's play for ADC, considering we haven't seen it for a while. From she was a bulldozer.
Yeah. I'm not sure if faith in Zven's ADC play is the right word. I just think Zven is a smart player and I want to see I'd be curious to see him play again. I don't know what that's going to look like. I think his ADC style probably won't change.
Yeah.
And I also thought like it's something that you could kind of similarly see in the supports he gravitated towards and the way he played support as well and the way he played for lane. But I also think this is going to be, I'm trying to think of because previously when he was in a lane with Berserker, he was the senior party in that lane. And I think this is going to be a little bit similar of a dynamic, despite the rules being different with him and Isles, especially since they have played together, where he is going to be, I think, kind of dictating the pace of the lane. But yeah, I mean, I'm just curious because I respect Zven's opinion on the game a lot, and I want to see him succeed. So that's why like I'm curious to see him come back to ADC.
Yeah. So I think I can answer to your question. She was a bulldozer, which was a longer question about people like his personality. But what is the faith in his ADC skills, right? So I think a lot of it is like his personality, how he articulates himself, The fact that he has grinded and played for so long and was at a very high level, right? His debut as an ADC, who was very high level, I think is what makes people excited for Zven. I don't necessarily think people expect him to be the best ADC in the league. But I do think that there, again, like we kind of talked about this, but there's a lot of, once you hit a high, your stock doesn't go down very easily, right? And I think also because he did transition into the support role, most of the supports he played were ranged supports, and he maintained good spacing, right? Auto attack trades, like a lot of what made the Berserker's Ven lane oppressive in an LCS context was the fact that they both spaced very well in lane for trade and had good trade patterns, and that is an ADC kind of like characteristic. Zven's always been very focused on lane phase, has always been like a very good laning phase ADC, and I think he's had this dynamic that Emily mentioned where he's the more senior member for multiple years of his career. He did it with Vulcan, for example. So I think that it's definitely something that he's probably more comfortable doing anyway at this point. So, yeah. And he has played with Isles before as well when he was a more senior member with Isles as well. So, yeah, I think it's definitely something that he has demonstrated a track record for, but it doesn't necessarily mean it will happen, right? That's something that you want to be very conscious of. But yeah, of course, people will be excited for Zven versus Berserker, so that'll be a fun matchup. All right, let's talk.
Lane swaps are probably dead based on 4.14.11 projection.
Yeah, we'll see. You know, I haven't actually seen the patch yet, so we'll see. I'm sad if they are, but anyway.
Sad looking at the notes, but we'll talk about that on a future episode once, because the patch is going to be patch is going to be coming out on Thursday because of the holiday in the US.
It's okay. I will be sustained by talking about Jungle XP for at least like
let's go
several co-streams. Anyway, MSI. Let's talk about what happened since MSI. This is a very general comment, but yeah. So I guess I kind of already talked about what I've been doing, which is I helped with the collegiate broadcast, the Salty Runback broadcast. I worked on some producer stuff for that. That was very fun. Got to see two St. Louis teams make it to Boise, Idaho. I love how the final is between two teams in fucking Missouri. They're just going to Idaho.
And they're playing in Idaho.
Yeah, it's the best. In like a closet or something. It'll be fun. Anyway, go ahead and watch that. It's happening soon. So I did that, but I've also been studying random stuff and playing Final Fantasy. So, Emily, what have you been up to?
I've been dealing with jet lag. I've been revisiting some of the sci-fi stories I was writing previously and then got distracted by an entire season of League of Legends. So if anyone is really interested in a lesbian romance sci-fi short story,
nice.
That's what I'm writing.
Will you actually post it though?
Maybe. I want someone to edit it, and you and Veteran already offered, so I might just send you the draft in like a week. But what else have I been doing? I've been playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth because obviously I also, even though it launched and I like tried to play it in season, I'm not going to focus on something that isn't League of Legends at the detriment of my job, because I am psychopath. And so I have been playing through that. I basically just started a whole new game, and kind of have been enjoying it a lot now that I don't feel because like when I'm starting a game in season, like if I really want to play something during a League of Legends season, I still always feel pressure to like get through it as soon as possible, because I could be studying, or I could be playing the game, or I could be doing something related to work. And that's not saying that I hate doing things related to work. I actually love doing things related to work. It's kind of a problem probably, but like now I can just kind of relax and take my time with it. And so it's the type of game that I think should be played like that, because there's a lot of mini games, there's a lot of like side quests, and it definitely feels better as a game if you have more space and time to just kind of relax and let those things kind of absorb and wash over you. So that's been really, really cool. I just, again, because I like restarted my playthrough, but I just got to Costa del Sol, which is fun. I think I will say the thing that the original game was really good at that you don't feel as much in this game is like, and I don't even know if they did it on purpose, but it's such a weird, the original Final Fantasy VII is just such a weird game and such a weird experiment. And there would be such tonal whiplash that would be weirdly affecting. I don't know if it was intended, but like you'd have situations where you're like, you face this absolute horror, like eldritch horror Genova boss, and it's like super serious on the ship, right? And it's awful. And then you go to Costa del Sol and everyone's like, woo, like we're hanging out, we're on vacation. And even though that still happens, like the immediate like whiplash is kind of lost, which makes me sad because it's not as like weird. They're obviously not like experimenting as much as the original game did, which obviously makes sense, but it is still a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying actually like spending time with it. And obviously, I think the other thing that I should talk about is that I haven't watched like super religiously, but I've been watching when I can, is the Legends Cup, aka the Old Man Cup. If you guys have not been following it, you should at least follow it, not for the games, but for the drama. There have been players quitting. There have been players insulting each other's mothers. There have been screaming matches on streams. There have been, fuck it, we give up, I'm going to start singing and dancing on stream. It's been a shit show, but a very, very fun shit show. And it's also, as my friend Linda said, everyone says they want player run orgs, and then take a look at the Legends Cup to see like what that would actually look like. And it's just so cursed, but like really fun. Obviously, like if you are fans of older LPL players that have retired, like I have a soft spot for Zatai, and obviously like seeing Zatai pop off was like really, really fun to watch. The two teams right now that are kind of like emerged as the favorites have been so I'm not going to use their real names because they're so stupid. So like if you look at the actual names of the teams, Blood, Omnipotence, Zeal Temperature,
Love Team Baolan, okay?
It's Team Baolan and Team Ning, I believe, are the two like top teams that kind of have emerged, which is Team Baolan is Xiang, Haoye, Mole, SMLZ, and Baolan. And then Team Ning is the reunion, the long-awaited reunion of the Shy and Ning, Zhao Sabao, WX, and Fire Lily playing support.
Yeah, I mean...
It's just been a time, and like if you obviously Kelsey's going to be co-streaming it, so it's just if you have any attachment to any of these players and just kind of want to see like an absolute fun shit show, I highly recommend you watch or at least follow the drama.
Yeah, I mean obviously what I care about is on Team Ning is Wei Zhao, okay? Forever. Every year I sing Baby Come Back. So I watch all the.
You rewatch IPL 5 and sing "Baby Come Back" to yourself in the dark room.
Come back. You can blame it. So it's unfortunate that I feel like no one actually cares about Wei Xiao on that team. It's just all about the Shining. Good times. But there was also a very cathartic moment when UZI's team played against like Team PYL. had lost. I don't know. It was cathartic because it had like Longxing and Korn. It was just like
their revenge.
It's the after years and years of playing with UZI, after having to play with UZI bottom lane hoarding all of the gold. And I think Longxing played actually really well that game. So yeah, it was fun to watch. It's for sure like just fun for just moments like that, I think. And then I watched Crystal's co-stream after KO were like confirmed knocked out, which is his team, Crystal's team. And he was like still wearing his shirt that he had made, and he was like, "Where's the teamwear, man? Like, why are you guys not repping your team? Where is it?" Because like I guess the players are playing and not wearing their jerseys, and he was just like very upset.
You do that to Crystal
that
honestly.
His team was eliminated, and he was still wearing the jersey that he made, which was legit just a T-shirt with the KO logo on it. It wasn't even anything.
I think.
And then
I think my favorite thing has been also that the team with the most drama, in my opinion, has been the team named Love and Peace, which is Zoom's team. And it's Zoom, MLXG, and then
Zoom and MLXG like
right?
hate each other, right? That's like the big drama.
And then Diangun was kicked off the team for insulting someone.
Of course.
So then Xiao is now playing.
Yeah. Love and Peace is just ironic because Love and Peace seems to have like a significant amount of drama, and it's called Love and Peace.
Yeah, they have the most drama, I think, of any team.
Yeah. Basically, this tournament is all about memes. So I don't know if we do co-stream it, we'll probably talk about a lot of random shit and then just have a good time.
Also, just a lot of old LPL stories, because that's like, again, like if you're watching this, like it's just really cool to see. Again, in my case, it was watching Zadai play again, but obviously if you're like a big, I don't know, Wei Xiao fan, for example, or I like had a weird soft spot in my heart for a Voidless because he had one split where it looked like he was going to be really good, and then it just didn't pan out. His team has already been eliminated. But again, like if you have any attachment to these players, it has been a really fun time.
Yeah, baby, come back. You can play
That's the title of the episode.
You just can't live without you. All right. Yeah. So I mean, tonight the matches are gonna be. Let me double check. It's the first elimination round of the playoffs, which is GG versus BGM. Yeah, again, GG, Gods of Gaming, also known as Team PYL versus Team BGM, which is, I think, Team Uzi. Or no. Uzi is Gank Me, and they're eliminated. Yeah, also that match that Korn and Longxing won, like, eliminated them from playoffs contention, so it's even better.
Yeah, that's the Let Me Imp team.
Yeah. The Let Me...
With Xiaopeng as the coach.
Yep. So I'm excited. So that'll be fun. And then I think at the same time, so I'll probably just do like a pip of whatever people want to watch. It's like LAP and ZT, which is Love and Peace, and that we just talked about, which is Zoom's team, and then Zeal Temperature, which is 957. So it's a tie. Probably Zatai's team will win, but we'll see.
He's had some insane solo carry performances. I'm like, my boy, come back. Surely you're still good enough for
LPL. Yeah. Also, Sia did join TS.
Oh yeah.
We didn't talk about that. I heard he was supposed to join as a positional coach, but he officially joined as a player. So that's an interesting one. So I think Cream got a lot of flack for MSI. As like a younger player, it makes some sense. But I mean, hopefully this ends up being something that makes him a better player rather than a worse player. And hopefully Sia still performs, because I have like a soft spot for Sia deep in my heart, you know. What a god.
Yeah. I hope he essentially becomes like positional mid lane coach. Obviously he is listed as a player, like listed as a substitute. But
yeah, I think he'll probably just be a positional coach. I don't think he'll play minigames, but they left it kind of open. So
it would be nice just to see, because like obviously the the end goal, at least for me, is like if you have a player like Kareem, having him again matriculate up to like a theoretically better roster like TES, and then be able to learn a lot from like the players surrounding him, especially players like Jackie Love and Mako. And so hopefully maybe having Shia as a positional coach will help that as well. Cause like I think you still see some like insane moments from Kareem, even at this MSI when he was getting flamed. He was like obviously really, really like wildly inconsistent from game to game, depending on champion, lane matchup. But I thought he still had some like really high moments. And I definitely don't want him to just kind of go the way of like a lot of players who end up getting highly criticized for their first international performances go. So I hope that really doesn't happen to Kareem, because I do think he still has like an insane amount of potential, and he has the pieces around him to hopefully help out. So,
and if he does, he can always years later beat Jackie Love
in the Legends Cup.
In the Legends Cup and deny him the opportunity to make the playoffs. All right, cool. Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to talk about the Energy event stream or like the Fear C9 show match at all. I personally didn't watch them, I'm going to be honest. I wasn't that interested, but they're just not as dramatic as the Legend Cup, so...
Yeah, I think like I like that teams are doing event streams. I don't really have anything to say outside of like I did watch a tiny bit of the FearX C9 match. I'm pretty sure I was in the airport by that time, or maybe it was earlier on in that day. It was definitely the day I left Chengdu though, so I wasn't able to watch all of it. I did watch the one where they like drafted their own teams. That was pretty fun.
Yeah, I will have to check the context on those. But I co-streamed like the FlyQuest show match, so I wasn't expecting them to be that interesting, right? But yeah, it looked like people had a lot of fun. I'm glad that Energy did theirs for charity. My biggest thing with these show matches is they don't generally get like a ton of viewership, so there's a lot of criticism that went to NA teams for not doing anything during the break in spring season, but also it didn't necessarily probably generate that much for them compared to the effort that went into putting on these events. So I also kind of get why they don't happen. Because it's like, put on these events, do these events, and then maybe you don't get the viewership or the return that you were expecting, right? So I think that that's definitely a valid consideration there. And that's I don't know what the solution is other than like because what fans want to see is like actual matches, right? So they can have bragging rights and talk shit and everything like that. But instead, you're just gonna get kind of for fun show matches, which I think the best way to do those is just to have the players stream their individual games, which Energy did, as far as I know. So yeah, maybe we'll see something like that.
Yeah, I think like. Obviously, better advertising. Also, the more you stream, since everything is like algorithmically driven now, you unfortunately like I know an issue with YouTube, for example, is if you don't post for a while, then you're not auto. It's really stupid. And anyway, I hate algorithms, so because I'm old as fuck. But I think that's like also a factor. And then
in my day we just put shit on Reddit.
Yeah, true, which is also
terrible,
fucking crazy, honestly. But I think the other thing is that I always like return to the and obviously this was still run by the like it was run by OGN, I'm pretty sure. And it was in tandem with the other tournament they were doing. But the show match I always go to is like the best iteration of a show match that was still really fun. And as far as I know, really well viewed was the 2014 OGN All-Stars. And which they were doing concurrently with, and I'm blanking on the name because my memory sucks now. I'll blame that on algorithms too. No, but like it was the tournament where they would send out like the two sister teams, and it was like a team wide. It was like a org wide tournament that was happening simultaneously. Anyway, it was 2 days, I'm pretty sure, and they would have drafted teams. They had a match called the Flower Five versus the Manly Five, which was supposedly the 5 prettiest players versus the 5 manliest players. They kept all chat open, and Chobra, who was casting it, would like translate things from all chat. It was insanely fun. That's the thing I always compare some of these like event matches to, and I think a lot of times when things miss, it's because they don't include these kind of fun things to show player personalities. That's actually why, even though I know they didn't get the viewership and it wasn't like I think as well marketed as it could be, I actually did enjoy the FlyQuest show matches because they had that same vibe, which was really nice. You could also even argue like something like the Legends Cup, right, has that same vibe. Like, why am I watching it? I'm watching for the drama, and I'm watching because I like seeing players like I used to follow who have these like really big personalities kind of pop off. So,
I think it'll be very fun. I will go back and like check the VODs, especially since a lot of the NACL guys casted for the games. But
they casted the Furex C9 one for sure.
Well, I know, for example, Demetrius, Alk Battery, and Mad Magical casted the Furex C9, and then a lot of the NACL casters did the Energy series or the Energy show match. I know Kangas and Joshi did at least. Cubby was on for a day. So I think that will be an interesting. I'll go back and take a look at those because maybe the event was fun and I just was kind of prioritizing collegiate, so I didn't get a chance to watch it. The other element of it is like obviously if players streamed more, then people would like be more excited about their brands and building those things, but also streaming like ad nauseum and not doing anything with the content, not packaging it, not marketing it in a unique way, not engaging with the community also doesn't do much, and they're not full-time content creators. So the question is, should esports just be full-time content creation? I don't know. It'd probably make more money. Anyway, we will.
Be obsolete in like 2 years and counting.
Hooray!
It'll be great.
Do random online classes with me, Emily. Let's go. Back to the future.
I love learning things.
It is fun. But yeah. Anyway, thanks everyone. I think that's it for this episode. We kept it weirdly under 2 hours, unexpectedly. And we will see you all next week, I hope, if Emily doesn't come hang out for random co-streams. So, yep. See you.